Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Author in Residence series on the book, Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, by Uri Levine. My name is Colin Mahan. I'm a Director of Programs at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, and for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you will see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those links and resources in the chat. We have a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So firstly, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. We'd love to see. We'll let you type those in as I get into our next item, which is the Q&A that we're going to run near the end of the session. So please submit those questions for us throughout the discussion and the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. All right, let's see. We've got Hollywood, Detroit, Canada, New York, Kansas, Boston, San Antonio, Toronto, New York City, Los Angeles, New Jersey, Brazil. All righty. Houston, Texas, love it. DC, Florida, Charlotte, North Carolina. All right, great to see you too. Thank you all for joining from all various time zones. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, as I mentioned. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We're humbled by their contributions and hopeful that you're grateful too. Now, before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple polls just to get a temperature gauge on how all of us in the entrepreneurial world are doing. So the first question, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic, in survival mode, feeling a little anxiety, or in fearful mode? Let us know. We use this to help reinforce the support structures that we develop for you, the entrepreneurs that we serve. All righty, looks like optimism is in the lead. Thank you for voting. I'm going to leave this up for another moment, but want to jump into our discussion today soon. So looks like optimism is in the lead, but there is a little bit of survival mode, anxiety, and a tiny bit of fear out there. And we totally understand it. Let's see. We're going to launch another poll around what's keeping you up at night. So these topics we'll actually use to fuel the programming that we host in the upcoming months. So thank you for voting. Gonna leave this up for another minute or so. All right, looks like finance is the clear winner here, but pretty good mix across the board: sales, marketing, scale, team, and survival. I know we'll touch on a bunch of these topics in our discussion today on the amazing hosts that we've got. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our special guest moderator. Shaloo Garg is a valued and loved board member at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. She's also a managing director of late-stage startups and unicorns at Microsoft. Shaloo, hello.
Hello, Colin. It's been ages. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am really excited about the conversation today. Firstly, I want to thank you all for making the time to join us today. It's a busy season for all of us, but I can definitely promise you one thing, that by the end of this conversation, you're going to come out a little bit more enlightened, hopefully a lot inspired, and of course, motivated. So I'm super excited today to host this fireside chat with Uri Levine. Uri and I got a chance to have a couple of conversations, and I always walked away thinking, man, this is good stuff. So I am quickly going to introduce Uri to you in terms of his background. He is a passionate entrepreneur and a disruptor. Like, how many times do we hear disruption in our business every day, right? So you have the person here. He's a two-time unicorn builder. I mean, he's built some really successful companies. He's a co-founder of Waze, the world's largest community-based driving traffic and navigation app, which was acquired by Google for $1.1 billion in 2013. Trust me, $1.1 billion acquisition back then was massive. and then former investor and first board member in MoveIt, which was Ways of Public Transportation, which was then later acquired by Intel for $1 billion in 2020. Uri has built more than a dozen startups and has seen everything ranging from failure to mid-level success to immense success. So I am really excited. Uri, welcome. I cannot see you, so if you can please switch on the camera, that'll be awesome. There you are. You're wearing the t-shirt. I love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for making the time. Is there anything that I may have missed in your introduction that you want to just add?
Actually, no.
Okay, great. So Uri, before we kind of dive into your book, Fall in Love with the Problem and Not the Solution, and I want to kind of tap into your entrepreneurial mindset as well. Let's start from the basics. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey to entrepreneurship, how you came about building companies like Waze and MoveIt, and then sitting on boards for multiple companies. How was that journey?
So I probably evolve into that part of it because I'm a troublemaker, and troublemakers don't take anything for granted, right? So they will challenge multiple things, and one of the greatest thing about being a troublemaker is that you keep on challenging things that other people will tell you this is how it is, right? And then you say, no, why is that so? Let me double check that, right? And you ended up with basically coming with different approaches, and you usually see that you try to pitch them to your existing organizations, and everyone is going to tell you no, just forget about it. This is not how we are doing things. Or you pitch that to your friends, and they're telling you this will never work, right? And then you realize that if you want to make an impact, if you want to change the world, then you have to do it by yourself. Then you have to go into this entrepreneurship journey.
That's fantastic. So I love the analogy of troublemaker, because making trouble is often considered risky, right? Because you kind of look at it and then say, will I succeed? Will I fail? So let's start with the title of your book, which is Fall in Love with the Problem and Not the Solution. So would love to just chat with you. Where did this come about, and what does it really mean? What does the title mean in the context of startups?
So at the end of the day, when we are building a startup, what we are really looking for is to create value, right? It's to make an impact. And at the simplest way to create value is solve a problem. So I want you to think of a problem, a big problem, something that it's worth solving, something that the world will become a better place if you solve that. And then ask yourself, so who has this problem? Now, if you happen to be the only person on the planet with this problem, I would say, you know what, go to a shrink. It's way cheaper and faster than building a startup. But if a lot of people actually have this problem, then what you need to do next is go and speak with those people and understand their perception of the problem. And only then go and build a solution. Now, if you follow this path and your solution works, it's guaranteed that you are creating value. If you start with the solution, you might be building something that no one cares, and that's really frustrating. Now, when you have the problem in mind, when you fall in love with the problem serves as your North Star. And when you have a North Star, you are going to make less deviations from the path to succeed. And you are going to make larger deviations if you don't have one. And the last part of it is that your story is going to be way more compelling, right? So just imagine that we will be here in 2007, and I will tell you, I'm going to build an AI-based crowdsourced navigation system. Then you're going to say, yeah, this is really interesting, but you don't really care. But if I will tell you I'm going to help you to avoid traffic jams, then you do care. And the story that you tell when you focus on the problem is way more engaging for everyone, right? So for your customers, for your investors, for your employees, for everyone, like to say, this is how I'm going to make the world a better place by solving this problem.
Yeah. You make an interesting point in kind of differentiating when you say, I'm going to help solve traffic jams, and then that's when you get everyone's attention. How do you know if the problem that you're trying to solve is the right one? So for example, I'll put it in the context of today's world. Everyone is running towards Web3. NFTs, right? The market is flooded with deal flow. Everyone is just talking about it. And everyone is like, yeah, I'm building a company in the metaverse space or in Web3 space. And when you ask them, well, what are you trying to solve? They say, well, I want to build the company of the future. So I'm building something. And there isn't really clarity. And that's kind of a big red flag for us as well as we kind of dive deeper. What, in your view, how does a company know that, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve and I have the right total addressable market size for it? Like I will have buyers for my product.
Yeah. Speak with potential customers, right? So if you are trying to solve a problem for consumers, go and speak with consumers. If you're trying to solve a problem for a specific group of consumers, go and speak with those groups and understand their perception of the problem. And when you do that, actually two things happen. Number one, you get a way clearer vision of how the solution should look like and what exactly you are trying to solve. And number two, they empower you. They sent you on a mission to solve that problem. So when a lot of people start to tell you their version of the problem, this is something that it's worth solving. Now, in reality, what you really need to do is think of a 2x2 matrix. That one of them will have one X will be the addressable market, right? So
yep.
How many businesses, how many people is that relevant for? And the other one should be the value that you bring. Now, if you can measure the value by frequency of use, if you're going to build something that is going to be used twice a day, this is awesome. This is really powerful. If you're going to build something that brings a lot of value, this is really good, because then the winners will be one that have large addressable market and creates a lot of value or have high frequency of use.
Yep. So Uri, let's kind of break down the process, the journey here. So let's say if I'm an entrepreneur, we have identified that, okay, I have a problem that I'm likely to solve. I've got the addressable market, I've got the business value. What does that journey look like? And that journey necessarily may not land into an IPO or a PE buyout or an M&A consolidation. What does that journey at a high level look like? Like you've gone through, you have the bruises. Would love to learn from you.
So the end of the journey is that you are creating value, right? And if your dream is about creating a lot of value to a lot of people, then this is the end of the journey for you. And whether or not this is going to end up financially as an IPO or an acquisition, it doesn't make any difference. Your focus is about value creation. Now, in general, I would say the journey have probably 3 sub-journeys, that each one of them, and the journey by and large is going to be a long journey, a journey of failures, and a roller coaster journeys with ups and downs and ups and downs. And this is something that you need to remember, because you will need to commit to this journey. And this journey is long and hard. And in particular, the longest part of it is that you have no traction, right? So nothing works. The first part of the journey is always going to be about figuring out product market fit. And when I say product market fit, what I really mean is that you create value to your customers or to your users. Because if you don't figure out product market fit, you will die, as simple as that. Now, if you do figure out product market fit, then you actually buy yourself a ticket to the next part of the journey. But it's very likely that you will be successful. If you're able to create value, then you're very likely to become successful. Now, I want you to think about it for a second. You never heard of a company that did not figure out product market fit. They simply died. That's it, right? But once you do figure out product market fit, the product does not change anymore, right? The product will be the equivalent to the value that you bring to your customers, right? So I want you to think of everything that you're using every day, right? So being searching Google, using Waze, Uber, Netflix, whatever it is, right? And ask yourself, what is the difference between any of those today and the first time that you have used that? And the answer is that there is no difference. We are searching Google today the same way that we search Google for the first time in our life. We're using Uber or Waze or whatever, the same way that we did it for the first time. So once you figure out product market fit, you don't change the value proposition anymore. The journey to that is really long, and it's really frustrating, because every step we have the conviction that we know exactly what we are doing, and then it turns out that it's not. And this is a journey of failures. And if you realize that this is going to be a journey of failures, then there are two things that you need to take into consideration. The first one, that if you're afraid to fail, in reality, you already failed because you're not going to try. Albert Einstein used to say that if you haven't failed, that's because you haven't tried anything new before. If you're going to try new things, you will fail. The second one, which is even more important, and in particular to this audience that most of them are entrepreneurs and they are not afraid to fail, or they already overcome the issue of fear of failures, you need to fail fast. Because the faster that you fail, the faster that you try something and it doesn't work, you actually have enough time to try something else and to make another attempt and another version and another addressing a different addressable market. And what we call pivot, it's not a pivot. It's the journey itself. It's multiple iterations of figuring out how do we solve the problem. And the faster that you do that, then you actually have more time to do something else. And the more attempts that you have, you increase the likelihood of being successful, as simple as that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's and if you think about it, it holds valid not only in professional life but in personal life as well. Like the more risk you take, right? So it's almost like if you're just sitting there not trying anything, then how will you experience that journey? And life itself is a journey. Not getting philosophical here, but I kind of wanted to draw the analogy.
Yeah, and you are right. Absolutely.
That's great. That's fantastic. So in your book, you talk about 100 no's. So I want to just understand, what is the series of 100 no's and how do you kind of recover from it? Because you talked about failure, and Uri, sometimes failure can be very daunting. It actually, I have seen not only in the entrepreneur world, but overall, it can break people. On the other spectrum, it can actually draw strength and have people kind of spring from it and come out even more stronger. What is the series of 100 no's, and what is your recommendation on how does one recover from it?
So let me first of all refer to something else, right? The beauty of failures is that when you get up, you fall down and you get up and you realize that you are still alive and nothing really happens. And this is what empowers you to basically say, I'm not afraid of the next one because I already experienced the ability that I can get up and continue the journey, right? And so in general, I would say the failures or the mistakes or the errors or every time that we fall down, if we recover from that, it's actually increase our perseverance and increase our ability to actually survive the next one. And this is why it's really important. Now, I mentioned earlier, I say that building a startup is a roller coaster journey, right? So there are ups and downs and way more frequent than any other business in the world. I think that I owe the best quote to Ben Horowitz. And he used to be a CEO of a startup, and he was asked whether or not he was sleeping well at night as a CEO of a startup. And he said, oh yeah, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. And this is really the reality of that, right? Fundraising is a roller coaster journey in the dark. You don't even know what's coming. Everything that seems to be so positive, all of a sudden they say no. And in reality, when you think about this fundraising journey, which is a sub-journey, it's not a journey by itself, but think about it as refueling your car to go into the journey, right? And unfortunately, you will need to refuel the car multiple times if the journey is long. And so this is a necessarily evil that you will need to get funded. And in reality, what happened is that we usually don't look at it as an entrepreneur. We don't look at it from the perspective of the fund. If we will start to look at it from the perspective of the fund, then we will increase our likelihood to getting a term sheet and eventually being funded. But first of all, we need to expect 100 times no. And the reason is that you look at the other side, and I will tell you, venture capital firm or venture capital partner is looking probably, meeting maybe 100 to 200 companies a year and eventually investing in one or two, 1%, maybe 2%.
Yeah.
So that in general, they are going to say 99% of the time, they're going to say no. And therefore you need to prepare to 99 times no. But the most important part is that when you're thinking of raising capital, and this is very differentiate between the first time that you're raising capital and then follow-on rounds or follow-up rounds. In the follow-up rounds, it's all about traction. You have created an impact, you have figured out product market fit, you made progress, and you're going to get funded based on that. Initially, there is a story, right? And this is really important because there are two really powerful conclusions. I spoke with some leading investors and asked them, how long does it take you to decide if you like the CEO or not? And the answer that I heard was seconds.
Yeah.
So first impression is seconds. Now, we don't want to accept that, right? We would like to think that we are all rational people and not emotional, but how long does it take you to decide that you like your date? Seconds. How long does it take you to decide that you like a new candidate that you're interviewing? Seconds. And then maybe you would allow yourself a few more minutes to either let that first impression sink or change that, right? And if this is the case, then you need to start your story with the strongest point at the beginning. Because if you don't, by the time you'll get there, it's possible that they already made up their mind. And the strongest point in your story, whatever it is, right? It could be that the problem is so big. It could be that your team is awesome. It could be that you have traction already. It could be that you have 7 patents on that. Whatever it is, by the time you'll get there, it might be irrelevant. So therefore, you need to start with that. The second part.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
The second part that I heard quite often from investors is that I asked them, why did you decide to invest in this startup or this startup and this startup? And what I heard was very consistent. I like the CEO. I like the story. I like the CEO. I like the story. That's it. I never heard anything else. Now, if this is the case, then there are 2 immediate conclusions out of that. Number one, as a CEO, you go raise capital by yourself. Because if there are other people in the room, they are going to take away some of the headlights. And you want all the headlights to be on you so they can like you. The second part is that you need to learn how to tell a good story. And if you don't know how to tell a good story, then go and learn how to tell a good story, because this is how you're eventually going to raise capital based on you and the passion that you should demonstrate, and in particular, the belief that they would like to believe that you can deliver, and then the story. And telling a good story is really, really important in that sense.
Yeah. No, I love what you said about the story, because I'm based here in the Bay Area and I'm surrounded by venture capitalists, private equity firms, founders. That's who I spend all my day with. And the mindset is, I'm going to start a company today. In 10 years, I want to go IPO, right? And it's always about, just that's the goal. And to your point, what is the value? And also in terms of going through failures, at the end of the day, IPO is good, or SPAC or exit is good, but going through the process, the journey, the storytelling, why are you there? That's all critical, right? And to your point, some of the best companies have seen that milestone. Others are still kind of sitting in Series D and E and kind of struggling to go there, because now they're struggling with the story. They had some amazing days early on, but now they're sitting in mid-stage and they're asking themselves, what is the value that I bring that nobody else brings? So great point there. And thank you for that. So Uri, we're going to do some fun stuff now. So all this was thought leadership. Amazing. I would love to double click on your experience with Waze. I mean, what a phenomenal story. I remember using Waze back then. Talk to us, like, how did the idea come about? What was the journey like? When were you at a point where you said, you know what, I'm ready to sell? I would love to just understand your story there.
So going to the beginning, right? The idea actually came about. So I started because I hate traffic, right? And as soon as I realized that, wait a minute, maybe there is a way that I can actually help drivers to avoid traffic jams, I decided that this is what I'm going to do. And that realizations came about somewhere in 2006 when I was actually traveling to the northern part of Israel for the weekend. And we were like 10 different cars there. And when it was time to actually leave, Israel is a small place, so essentially there are like two routes that you could have gone back to the center area. And everyone left before we did. And so I called them up and asked them, how is traffic like in your route, right? And based on the answers, I chose the fastest route. And I realized that all I need is someone to be ahead of me on the road and tell me what's going on, right? And then I can actually navigate through the traffic. And it was only in 2007 when I met the other founders, and we decided that we are going to go into this journey. And initially we went fundraising, and that was 8 months of fundraising. Essentially, it was a long journey, and it was 100 no's. Actually, I don't think it was 100, but it was a lot of no's. And in particular, what I really heard a lot is that this will never work, right? And by the way, Mark Randolph, one of the founders of Netflix, wrote a book called "This Will Never Work," right? Because of that. And those were the nice guys, right? The nicer guys. They told me this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard. And you go with the mission and with the conviction that that this is a problem worth solving. And eventually we raised capital at the beginning of 2008, and we started a company, and we started to build. And the first version of Waze was running on a PDA. Remember, long
Yes,
ago,
yes, I do.
there were dinosaurs, and then PDA phones, and then Nokia phones, and eventually we all have iPhones and Android phones, right? This long time ago is only 15 years, right? You start to ask yourself, wait a minute, this is how the world have changed in 15 years.
I know.
If we start to look at it, then if I will have a time machine and I will send you back 15 years, that means that I'm going to take away your iPhone and Uber and Waze and WhatsApp and Netflix and pretty much everything that you're using every day. It's unclear that we will survive. This is how fast things are happening, how fast things are changing. And in reality, if you think about it, so what does it mean about the future? Let me say the following, right? Just imagine, think of the top 10 companies of the world today, right? So Apple and Amazon and Facebook and Google and Microsoft and so forth, and ask yourself how many of those are going to remain in the top 10 companies a decade from now? And the answer is that only 5.
Yeah.
We don't know which one. If we will know, then I will tell you, you know what, sell short on the others, and this is it, and we are done, right? But we don't know. The more interesting questions is which companies are actually going to replace them in the top 10. And some of those, you haven't heard their name yet. They're still in the early phase of trying to figure out product market fit, and you haven't heard their name yet. And if you don't believe that, then go back in time. Go back in time 10 years and ask yourself how big Tesla was, how big Facebook was, how big Airbnb was, all right? How big of some of the giants of today were back then, and you haven't heard their name back then. So going back to Waze, we started then building the first real-time version, and we launched the product in Israel in 2009. Now, Waze has a magic in it because Waze crowdsources all the information, not just traffic information and speed traps, the map data itself. So when we started, there was a blank page. There was absolutely nothing on the map. And when the driver started to drive, then we actually collected the GPS data from the device. And this is how we created the map and the intersections and the roads and so forth. And we enabled map editing tools that people can provide us with street names and house numbers and points of interest and so forth. And it was about 6 months for a map in a populated area to become good enough. Now, Waze is free. Free and good enough actually is scheduled to win the market. But then what happened is, and that was the way that it was working in Israel. And at the end of 2009, we decided that we are going to launch the product everywhere. And we did. So 2010, there is Waze available every place on the planet. It turns out that it's not good enough. It was not good enough in the Bay Area. It was not good enough in Los Angeles. It was not good enough anywhere in the US. It was not good enough in Western Europe either. It was not good enough in most of Latin America. It was not good enough anywhere except maybe 4 places, Czech Republic, in Slovakia, in Latvia, in Ecuador, and that's about it. And we are realizing that it's not working, right? So the story, people really like the story. We, the drivers, are going to help the rest of the drivers to avoid traffic jams. And so they have downloaded the app, and it was not good enough. So we spoke with the drivers, we realized what doesn't work for them. And we built the next version that addresses all the issues that they've told us. And we know that this is it, and it's not. So we're doing it all over again, right? So we speak with the drivers, they tell us what doesn't work, we go and fix everything, and we go with the conviction that this time it's definitely going to work, and it's not. For a whole year of iterations, another iteration, journey of failures, right? Trying again and again and again. Eventually, we got it to the level of good enough. And then we have started to see that it's taking off in LA, and then San Francisco, and then Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., and New York, and Chicago, one metropolitan after the other. In Europe, that was one country after the other. Italy first, and then Netherlands, and Spain, and France, and Sweden, and one country after that. And then what happened is that, and this is the whole year of 2011, that we are reaching critical mass, becoming good enough in multiple places. 2012, Waze was actually growing faster than the entire industry combined. So you take all navigation devices and all navigation apps and all in-car navigation system, Waze outgrew all of them combined. And then in 2013, Google came with a proposal to acquire us, and we simply said yes. And I left the day after in order to build more startups. So to the question, you don't build a company in order to be sold. You don't sell a company. Someone comes and offer you an offer that you cannot refuse, and then you don't refuse. As simple as that. And that was what happened in 2013 when Google actually approached us with a proposal to acquire us. And at the time, look, people often ask me whether or not it was the right decision or no decision, or wrong, or would it be better if I would keep the company and run it until today and then sell it today? And for a second, I would say they are right decisions or no decisions. Because when you make a decision, this is by definition the only decision, and therefore it's the right decision. You don't know what would have happened if you would choose a different path. So telling me that Waze today would be worth way more than $1.1 billion in 2013, absolutely yes. But what we don't know is whether or not Waze would become what it is today if we would remain independent and continue our path. And by the way, that will apply to many of the decisions that we are looking at, right? So just imagine that Google struggled at the beginning of their journey, right? And they were unable to raise capital, and they approached Yahoo, and they actually approached Excite at Home that was part of Yahoo, and asked them to acquire them. And they asked them how much, and they say $2 million, right? 2 million, not 2 billion, not 2 trillion, $2 million. And Yahoo said no. And so you look at it today and you say, big mistake. You don't know that. You don't know what would have happened if they would have said yes. And so therefore, when we make a decision, by definition, it is the right decisions. Now, if you're looking for a tool to make decisions, when I was young, I one day approached my dad and I asked him, look, I have these 2 options and I don't know which one to choose. And so he reached out to his pocket and got a coin out and said, I'm going to flip the coin. And before the coin drops, you're going to make the call. Now, the reality is that we are in many cases looking for confirmation. We know what is the right decision. We're just looking for confirmation. The coin will drop, and it's actually a very good confirmation.
Yeah. Amazing story, Uri. I mean, very inspiring. I think we picked a lot of good nuggets, but one of the things that really stood out to me when you said in your early days, you talked to customers, right? And that is so important because oftentimes companies kind of get in their own realm and they're like, well, this is V1, we need to build V2. And yes, V1 is picked revenue and maybe we'll tweak a little bit it's very important to be in touch with the market especially your consumers. And some of the best startups I've seen build focus groups or customer advisory boards. Nothing too high maintenance, but basically hear that feedback from the field into the product development. And I love that about what you said is you constantly kept that going. That's phenomenal. I mean, clearly
let me interfere here and give a couple of perspectives, right? So just imagine that there are two twin sisters companies, right? They start the same day, they have exactly the same teams, they're making progress the same way. And then at a certain point of time, this company is saying, you know what, our product is not ready yet. Let's do more iterations to evolve, to make it better, right?
Yeah.
And this one is saying, I'm going to go out with the current product, right? The product are exactly identical, right? But from this point on, this company is actually going to move so much faster because they have the feedback of the market, the feedbacks of the users.
Yeah.
And people are usually afraid to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to, my product is not ready. This is embarrassing level of product. If I'm going to launch that, then people will, my users will hate me forever. But you don't have any users. So what exactly they're going to hate you for, right? The early adopters or the innovators that you're going to have, they will forgive you as soon as you're becoming good enough.
Yeah.
The part of the group that wouldn't, you don't have them at the early days. And so the best way to think about the innovators or the enthusiastic amateurs, the first users are the ones that actually help you to improve the product.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then in reality, you will remain stuck in your lab and you will never be ready. The biggest enemy of good enough is perfect. You don't need to be perfect in order to win the market. You need to be good enough.
Exactly. And I love that. So obviously you're a pro in storytelling. Done. 10 out of 10 to you on that. I would like to double click on something that's top of mind for everyone given the macro environment, which is investments. You've had a successful journey in ways, and many of the startups is because you obviously had a great product. You listened to your customers. You were patient through the journey. It wasn't about selling. It wasn't about going IPO. It was like, what do I need to do best? And you had the financial backing, right, from investors. We talk often about, the challenges that entrepreneurs face in the market. I've also heard the word bad investor. I'm sorry. Is there a bad investor?
Of course they are.
Great. Talk to us about it. What do you think, who is a bad investor? Or is it that their judgment about an investment is bad and they could be good investors in another portfolio?
They could be, right? So obviously at the end of the day, the relationship between an entrepreneur and in particular the CEO entrepreneur and the investors is critical, right? And in some cases, I would say at the end of the journey, there are only two types of relationship, right? You either love each other or you hate each other. Because that was part of the behavior throughout the journey. Now, for a second, I would say, Vinod Khosla said once that, 70 to 80% of the investors create more damage than help. Now, if this is the case, then you're really looking for an investor that does not interfere, and at least they are in the middle ground, that they don't create any damage. But at the end of the day, look, there are areas where everyone wants the same, and there are areas that there is conflicts of interest. But the most important part is to understand how does investors think of, right? Investors does not invest in one company. They hedging their bets on multiple companies. A venture capital firm or even an angel investors, they might be investing in 10 or 20 different companies. And they're looking for one to become extremely successful. And extremely successful will be the one that takes extra risks, right? So they are in most of the cases, the companies that takes higher risk are eventually, if they're going to be successful and not die beforehand, will end up with higher return.
Yeah.
You as a CEO of a startup, you have one company and you need to make this one successful, even if it's less successful than what the investors are hoping for. And this creates conflicts of interest. And at the end of the day, when there are conflicts of interest, then obviously, hey, if they force you to do things, then you would consider them as bad investors. In general, And this is really important, right? You go and speak with many investors, and eventually there's one investor that tells you, you know what, this is interesting. I'm going to write you a term sheet, and then I'm going to start my due diligence. Exactly that time, you need to start your due diligence as well. And you need to figure out, how is this investors to my journey? Because they might be in a position of make or break your journey. And, the same way that they're going to speak with people that knows you to get feedbacks on you and how well are you going to perform as a CEO and what is the likelihood that you will deliver and so forth. You need to do the same. You need to speak with CEOs that they have invested in, and the journey is over, right? So either they went public or were acquired, or actually went down the drain, unfortunately, right? Because these are the people that will provide you with the honest opinion. And you need to do this due diligence, because if you don't know what you're going to this is Catholic marriage, right? There is no way out.
Yeah.
And it's painful, right? It's painful if you have wrong investors that don't want to join you for your journey. And when this happens, the sheet hits the fan.
Yeah. So, we talked a lot about the story, the value, the journey, the investors, the customers. I want to take maybe a couple of minutes here to talk about the backbone of the company itself, besides the C-suite and the investors, which is the talent that exists in a company. Now, in your book, you suggest that firing is more important than hiring, and that this is a large impact on the CEO's position in the company, because obviously the CEO carries the vision of the company. And so in some aspect, there's some impact there. Can you just walk us through why you put more emphasis on firing? I know you're a very good person at heart, so would love to just get your perspective as to, when it comes to firing, why is there more emphasis on that?
So you're right. In my book, there is a chapter that called Firing and Hiring. And when I send it, the initial proposal to the publisher, he said, no, this is hiring and firing. And I said, no, this is firing and hiring. And let me explain why. I spoke with many entrepreneurs that their startup failed and asked them why, what happened? And about half said the team was not right. And I kept on asking, okay, what do you mean the team was not right? And so they told me, we had this guy not good enough and this guy. So not good enough is a major reason that I heard quite often. Another reason that I heard quite often is that we had communication issues, right? Something that I actually called ego management issues. And then I asked them the most interesting question: when did you know that the team is not right? Mm-hmm. All of them knew within the first month. There was one guy that told me before we even started. So he said, wait a minute, if you knew within the first month that the team is not right and you didn't do anything, the problem was not that the team was not right. The problem was that the CEO did not make hard decisions. Making easy decisions is easy. Making hard decisions is hard. This is why in most organizations, in most small organizations, the hard decisions will go all the way to the top, to the CEO. Now, here is what amplifies the problem big time. Imagine that you're in a small team, say 10 or 20 or 30 people, right? This is like a startup at the beginning, right? And there is someone that shouldn't be there. Maybe that someone is way underperforming, and maybe that someone is fighting or ego challenging everyone else. It shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Everyone knows. And the CEO doesn't do anything. And that's where the problem is. And so when you fire such a person that shouldn't be there, what will happen is that everyone will come and tell you it was about time. And the result is that the existing team is going to perform better because now they are more committed to the journey. And the person that you just fired, the problem was that they are not going to be successful. If you send them someplace else, they might be successful. You are actually doing them a favor. And so in my book, after I'm explaining all those issues, then I'm basically telling people, look, every new hire in the company, mark your calendar for 30 days down the road and ask yourself one question. Knowing what I know today, would I hire this person? Now, if the answer is no, then fire them immediately. They are not going to be successful, and the company deserves to be successful. And in particular, the rest of the team already know that. But this person deserves to be successful as well. And they might be successful someplace else. Here, they're not going to be successful. And by the way, if we discussed philosophy earlier, you want to take that to any part of your life, then ask yourself, knowing what I know today, would I do something different? And if the answer is yes, then do something different today. Today is the first day of the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective. And I love the way you phrased it, that they may not be a good fit here today, but they're a better fit somewhere else and they can be more successful. So it's actually a win-win, right?
Exactly.
Both for the company and for them. So that's great. So I know we are on time here and there are a lot of questions here. I'm going to randomly pick a couple. Anna, if you can just drop a link where Uri can be reached offline. That'll be awesome. Just so that, I'm just going to randomize the questions. So if your question is not answered, we definitely recognize it and we'll definitely circle back. All right. Uri, are you ready? So this question, again, very random question is, how do you incentivize early adopters, first users to give their time and feedback? So we talked about, customers, we talked about how you were often in touch. How do you motivate them? Like, how do you incentivize them?
You don't need to. They are innovators, right? They care about what you're doing. They are enthusiastic amateurs. The fact that you have built something new that fits their space, their environment, their world is actually very powerful for them. And they will be very happy to become part of the journey and tell you and provide you with the feedback. And so you're going to have enough of those that will provide you with the feedback. Obviously, not everyone, but you don't need everyone. You need enough, and you will get them easily.
That's great. The next question is, how did you meet your co-founders, and what made you realize that these are the people that you want to commit to such part of your life, such big part of your life?
So mutual friends actually made the introduction. And when we met, we realized that we share the same vision about helping drivers to avoid traffic jams. And they actually already built some technological parts of it. So we decided that we're going to start a journey. Now, the reality is that only after a few months, you realize that this is really the team that you would like to build with. And one significant part is that we shared not just the vision about what the company is doing, but also the DNA that we would like to build. Because I've seen a lot of times that the DNA of the company is going to be formed within the first year. The culture of the company, the business culture of the company, the priorities, everything is going to be formed. If you don't define that up front, you might be building a creature that you don't like. And it's your opportunity to actually define, this is what is really important for me in a working environment, right? In the organizations, in the priorities. And we were aligned with that at the very first day. And when we started, we say, this is going to be the best working place we ever had.
That's great. That's awesome. I have a super interesting question. It says, if you were to do it all over again without any resources, that's a very tricky one. What would you do different and what would you keep the same?
So Waze was not possible without resources because in some cases, there is a rocket science in terms of technology development. And I don't think that I would be able to get dozens of engineers to build the initial version, the real-time version of everything without the ability to pay them. I would say, however, that 100% of the Waze employees had share options or equity plans. And at the day of the acquisitions, it was a life-changing event for 100% of the employees. And 75% of them became millionaires overnight.
Wow, that's great. Great stuff there. That's good. One last question, and then I'll pass it on to Colin. So have you seen startups that discover or demonstrate product market fit, but fail due to inadequate funding?
It's less likely. I have seen, but it's less likely, right? I had one that struggled at the beginning of the COVID, and there were a lot of dialogue with international investors, and then everything stopped immediately, and so they failed because they were unable to raise capital. And they did figure out product market fit, and for a second I would say, look, product market fit, end of the day, is measured by one metric, and this is retention. And they actually had a very good retention of their product. So it does happen, but rarely. At most of the cases, what is more likely to happen is that if you struggle to raise capital, then you will end up with less favorable terms and perhaps raising less capital, but you will get funded if you figure out product market fit.
That's great. So one last question, and that's my question. As if I haven't asked enough questions, is closing comments, words of wisdom for inspiring entrepreneurs, established entrepreneurs, student entrepreneurs who are in colleges, universities with a big dream that they want to be a founder one day. Your closing comments for those, everybody.
Don't be afraid to fail. Simply don't be afraid to fail. Go into this journey, and for a second, I would say, look, second-time entrepreneur have so much higher likelihood of being successful, regardless what happened on the first journey. And so go into this journey, and by that, you are going to, even if you fail, you are going to dramatically increase the likelihood of being successful the next time.
I love it. So while we were having this conversation, I took some notes, and I'm going to recap the conversation here. From being a troublemaker to making an impact, driving a solution that makes an impact. 2x2 matrix, which is addressable market size and value. Journey of failures. We talked about crowdsourcing. We talked about taking those signals from the market, always keeping your ear to the ground. And then talent. Make sure that it's a win-win. Uri, I have learned a lot. I have your cell number. I will be calling you. Thank you so much for such an inspiring conversation. And, it's just amazing. I mean, congratulations on a very fulfilling life, full of challenges. And I'm sure you're leaving a legacy behind of many inspiring entrepreneurs who will look up to you. And of course, you'll continue to mentor them as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What a way to conclude, Shaloo. Yeah, you even gave us the takeaways, which I love.
Yes, I was taking notes.
Thank you so much, Shaloo, for leading such an amazing discussion. Uri, thank you so much for joining us to share more about your book and your journey. Hopefully it's an inspiration to all the entrepreneurs online in our community and for those of us who are watching later. So thank you both for joining us today.
That's great. Thank you, folks. All right,
amazing.
Bye.
Well, if you're still on and you're watching us on YouTube, check out our other events that we have coming up in the next couple weeks and months. We'd love for you to join us. And also, we'd love your feedback. So if you could fill out that survey and let us know what other topics you'd like us to host in the coming months, we'll be sure to take a look at those. But on behalf of everyone on our team, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you all online back with us soon. Thanks again, everyone.